This whole thing has been quite brief but rampant in that same sentence. Pretty much like a roller coaster almost. It's a fast ride, but quite a lot has happened within a short span of time. And yes, this is me talking about the Hellena Taylor sort of story once again. But to kind of like wrap it up at this point with air quotes, I'm sure it is possible for further stuff to develop at this point. Who knows? I mean, maybe the companies will go after Miss Taylor here, for pretty much defamation, right? As she attempted to boycott the game because of reasons we pretty much know by this point. But to put it briefly, well, first off, I wanted to talk about this is because it was quite the learning experience for me, even for me. Despite having to take some precautions in the past with some of these sort of situations, like the allegations, right, between two people. Oh, he did this to me, that sort of thing, on Twitter, as you kind of see, especially from like the Smash Brothers stuff from 2020, right? I learned quite a bit from there, but I failed to sort of pretty much, carry that sort of consistency even for this situation, because I didn't think it would happen, right? I mean, first off, just to put it briefly, Hellena Taylor claimed that she was paid $4,000 for the whole project for Bayonetta 3. That's what she claimed in the video. That she just said is a flat rate of $4,000 for the whole game. That was her quote. And then later, Jason Schreider and other journalists were able to find sources that pretty much were able to counter that statement, and pretty much it was looking pretty bad for her, right? So pretty much like she was offered, this much money per session, no matter how you look at it, whether that's cheap or fair or whatever. The matter of fact is that she omitted that from her initial video in order for her to have a case of sorts to boycott the game. And on top of that, she, even threw shade at Jennifer Hale, the new voice actress for Bayonetta 3. And along the way, she even said, of course, oh, Bayonetta is my character, that sort of thing. She has no right to sign merchandise. And, and before that, of course, she claimed that the game as a whole has made, $450 million. I don't know why she keeps claiming so without merchandise. I don't know why she keeps claiming that, even though that's looking like it's definitely not true. It's a pretty niche franchise still, even though she is a well-known character within the gaming realm. But the franchise as a whole isn't so much big like so many other Nintendo and Sega franchises out there. It should have added up to this whole thing becoming a false statement, pretty much, a false claim, in order for her to try to get back at the company somehow, who pretty much, I guess, in her eyes, didn't put out enough pay what she thought she was worth, and Bayonetta and all that stuff. I mean, she had a right to sort of like try to raise the price. I mean, sure, I guess that's what negotiations are there for. There were claims in that document where she was asking for 6 digits. She says that that's a false claim, but then around that, in that same sentence, she pretty much admitted that the $15,000 or $10,000 is true, even though she just said, the whole $4,000 thing, flat rate, that was for a cameo. So people are saying like, oh, it's a half truth, but she still lied. I don't know. I mean, I think it's just as good as lying, really. I mean, when you exclude information and you purposefully leave out information, I think that's just as good as lying than anything, right? Omitting it or not, I think that's just lying in general. As a whole, I'm very much disappointed, and even, especially with myself, I pretty much let the heat of the moment sort of get the best of me. It's because it's like a lot of these times, you want to root for the underdog, right? The one person versus the big company. And that kind of like, and plus this is Hellena Taylor, who voiced a character that I do like. While I'm not a huge hardcore fan, but I do really like the character more ways than one, because she's sexy and badass and has that charm, classy. She has a lot of like of the sort of those cool combinations thrown into one. That's why a lot of people like Bayonetta, right? Along with myself. Not to mention the guns, the magic powers, and everything, right? And on top of that, her sex appeal and stuff like that, her coolness, right? She ain't some damsel in distress fan service type of character. She's strong, cool, and sexy. And of course, Hellena Taylor is, we can say, a talented voice actress, and brought the character to life. I, looked up to her in some way, because I do like voice acting. I've considered, do something with that at some point in my future. I don't know. We'll see about that. But here, it's just one of those situations where it's like, that saying goes, right? Like, never meet your heroes. I'm afraid to say, because it's very much similar to those stories where I've watched YouTubers like talked about like their sort of encounters and their sort of interactions with their favorite, let's just say like basketball players, right? They're really talented. They look up to them. They're very inspirational, and you want to meet them naturally. But then you go to meet them and they're like the biggest assholes, egotistical, or whatever the case may be, but they're not the person that you thought or wanted to turn out to be, right? It's kind of the same thing here. Hellena Taylor is kind of just lost it. I don't know what it is, but just turns out to be a goofball, and not to mention crazy, because she keeps talking about charity and stuff like that in her statements, in my eyes, to kind of like fluff it up a bit, or quite a bit. But in her most recent tweet, she talked about like, donate to these organizations or whatever, and one of them was apparently a anti-abortion group. So I'm pretty much backing away from that stuff. I'm completely like sort of just void of what she is trying to put out at this point. I mean, unless she's gonna like have a lawyer or something, and then try to, I don't know, get a court case or just some sort of legal settlement out of this. I mean, best of luck to her, but like at this point, I don't know, man. It's not looking pretty good. It was very flip-floppy. A lot of people were on her side, including voice actors and actresses, all the fellow voice artists and stuff like that, because they had similar experiences, being paid pretty low for what they're worth and what the project was, right? There's that whole other side of the argument about, the voice actors and all that stuff shouldn't be complaining because all they do is just talk on the mic and get paid and stuff like that, hefty amount of money, quote unquote. I mean, that stuff, that was like just annoying to see, because people just don't realize that how often these projects come about. And you have to also take note of that, only few people are being casted into these projects. There's only going to be the one main character actor and such like that. And so you gotta remember those sort of things. And yet people just keep like saying, it's $250 an hour or $1,000 an hour or whatever it is, when they don't look at the whole picture here. Instead they just let themselves look at that short term, like just right on the surface, like, it's $4,000. That means if she is doing this many hours per session or whatever, then it's this. No, that's not how it works, right? I mean, it's just so different, and it's just something people will never understand until they're in that field, right? You're constantly looking for gigs. You're constantly fighting it against other fellow voice artists, around your level, and only one person can get that role, right? For a lot of these projects. So it's tough. It's really tough. to see how these things go, but just people are just not willing to understand that for whatever reasons. I mean, not everyone's an artist, so they don't have that sort of mentality. So I get it there, but they're just so persistent, and it's just so annoying to see. There's just too many people comparing their jobs to theirs. It's very different. You're paid by the hour, they're not. Pretty much, they're paid by session, they're paid by project, whatever, right? It just depends on the contract, all that stuff, unions and everything. I think the big argument that we can take, or the big conversation that we can take away from all this, is that voice actors and voice artists, all that stuff, are still underappreciated and of course underpaid. Now, of course, there's the other side of the argument as well. People brought this up in the comments that in my video that I made a short out of, right? I made that very initial short of me saying, oh, this happened for $1,000 or whatever, and I'm not buying the game because, I initially believed her, blah, blah, blah. There was someone who brought it up and said, oh, but what about the devs, right? Of course, the devs should be paid and stuff like that. But we're not talking about the devs, we're talking about the voice artists, at the end of the day. Really. I mean, there is a problem within the gaming industry as a whole. I think there's a lot of underappreciation for a lot of who contribute to these gaming projects. They reap a lot of cash, and yet they pocket a lot of that for themselves instead of properly paying the developers and of course everyone else who has contributed to the project, including voice actors and voiceover artists and stuff like that. So I think that's a whole nother problem itself. The gaming industry is still hell. There's no proper union for any of those things. I mean, that I know of anyway. I mean, when it comes to voice acting and stuff like that, yes, they do have a union, but it's still not like, not all the cogs are well oiled and lubricated and stuff like that within that machine. There's still problems with it. There's still people who are, trying to fight for a fair wages and stuff like that, and all that. So, there's a lot of, arguments going back and forth from all this stuff, not just for or against Hellena Taylor. This whole thing about voice actors and stuff like that is still a problem, no matter how you look at it. And of course, for those who just aren't involved with that sort of stuff, will just never understand. And so I'm not going to bother too much to try to convince them. There's really no point. But I do want to emphasize that yes, there is a problem still with the voice artists and everything. More so with the English side of things, right? Of course, just to make that clear. The English side of things is where the problem really lies, more likely than the Japanese side, for example. They get paid pretty well. In fact, they're pretty much like they're like kings and queens in comparison to the English voice actors and stuff like that. So I think that's still something worth paying attention to, in my opinion, and we should definitely sort of like consider that, until things kind of like work out for the voice acting and stuff like that. But when it comes to Hellena Taylor, I think she's definitely done. She even said, I'm done with being Bayonetta and I just want to go back to theater, pretty much. Especially when the whole thing about the article with Jason Schreier and all the others corroborating, she just kind of said, oh, I'm done with this and stuff like that. She didn't like properly have her sort of like counter arguments and evidence and stuff like that. It's like, you already broke the NDA, why not go out, you know what I mean? But with all this stuff that she tried to pull, especially with the guilt tripping and stuff like that, it's really not looking good, definitely by the end of this point. So again, I'm very disappointed for a lot of reasons, right? Because Hellena Taylor is not the person I thought she turned out to be. Also, I let myself, fall into this stuff because it's Hellena Taylor. It's just a lot of things I'm disappointed about. I'll try to do my best to hear the other side of the story. Because, you know, to be fair, I mean, a lot of these stories, it's always about the underdog against the big company, especially with the whole Blizzard thing, right? Activision Blizzard. Yeah, a bunch of people talking about their stories, and then you got the big company, you know, with the lawsuit and everything. And also, there was the one YouTuber who got a bunch of copyright claims and strikes thanks to Toei, because he had a lot of like anime footage in his thing, but he was doing reviews, so it was fair use, right? So you automatically root for the little guy versus the big company. So that was the kind of like mechanism or pattern that that kind of like naturally followed with Hellena Taylor in this case, but it pretty much did not turn out things I thought would be, right? So, or a lot of people did, you know, and so it's kind of sad to see, you know, again with the whole never meet your heroes thing. It always sucks. Now it's not. There's always the exception, of course. Not everyone's like that, but it just sucks when you see it. You hate to see it, and you know that's all there is to it. So, now there is one thing to say, of course. Go get Bayonetta 3 because it will support the franchise and everyone else who contributed and stuff like that. And I'm pretty sure Jennifer Hill will do a good job as Bayonetta, being the new Bayonetta. You know, so let's give her the warmest of welcomes because I believe the game is out at this point, and yeah, hopefully the franchise can continue with flying colors. Hopefully, it's a pretty niche franchise, and by the time the next game comes out, hopefully it's not on just a Switch or anything like that, because that thing is showing its age pretty fast, I think. But yeah, anyways, I think we're done with this whole thing. Pretty conclusive at this point. And yes, it's very disappointing to see Hellena Taylor turning out to be like this. So again, hate to see it, but it is what it is. So if anyone has an opinion about this whole story, what was your experience like, I guess? And if you're playing Bayonetta 3, hey, what's it like? Is it good? Is it fun? Is it still Bayonetta? Let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more videos coming out from this channel. And I really do appreciate it, guys. So hopefully we can move forward. Hopefully things do come out, good things come out of this. There is something, you know, with Viola's voice actress, you know, doing the donation thing with the some sort of like transgender stuff. Came out to be $5,000. So that's pretty awesome, right? So there is something coming out of it. But hopefully this won't be a step back for voice actors and stuff like that. Hopefully they get something out of this whole thing going forward. Alright, well, that's it for me. I'll see you guys in the next video. Sean out.